Okay, welcome to another episode of What Part of the Game Is That? Today we have Miss Ramsey on the line, who hails from New York City. Miss Ramsey, how are you today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Today we're going to be talking about the cost of living versus minimum wage. And I come up with a few questions, and I'd like to get your opinion on it. Because personally, I feel that minimum wage is not calculated the way it should be. I did a little bit of research on this, and I found that minimum wage in certain areas is calculated based on what businesses are able to pay. And although that may sound right, I don't quite feel that's the way it should be done, because these businesses are making millions and billions of dollars. For example, let's say like a franchise of McDonald's, or maybe a 7-Eleven, or these big franchises. These
Right.
companies are worth billions and billions of dollars. So to
Okay.
say that they can only afford to pay the minimum wage is ludicrous, because they're constantly increasing their net worth. And, I understand their expenses might be going up. And in that case, prices should entail, go up. But when you have a basic cost of living that must be met in order for your employees to be able to sustain a reasonable, lifestyle, the minimum wage should meet that, whatever it is.
Correct.
And
Right.
wanted to get your opinion on it.
Okay. The minimum wage now in New York City is $15 an hour,
Correct.
and that's going across the board.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes, it
So
is.
if we talking about $15 an hour, we talking about 40 hours for the week. So
Yes.
I guess if you break it down, if you get in 15 and you work in 8 hours, that bring you what, $120 a day.
Okay.
And if
It's
you
about
and if you
that.
work
Yes.
And if you work in 5 days, it gives you about what, $600 for what, for a week.
Right.
Give you six for the week, and I guess if you do your math and times that, you get 2,400 for the month.
Correct.
But now we have Uncle Sam.
Right.
You have to pay taxes,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess they're going to do their deductions out of that. So now it all depends on, okay, what's my rent? My rent is $2,200.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can I afford that? It's going to be a little bit tight. I may would have to do overtime. Not maybe. I would have to do overtime or pick up an extra job to make those ends meet. So, as what you were saying, um, the minimum wage should be what the cost of living is, and it depends on the area where you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, how can we really resolve it? How can we really get that $15 bumped up to $25? You know what I mean?
Yes.
My thing is this. Okay, let's say in the low income areas where you have private houses, you also have low income buildings. That's the problem, because the low income houses, they're not paying $2,000 a month because of the low income.
Right. Correct.
So the rent is going to be much cheaper than someone who owns a house in the low income. It's hard for them to get that 2,000 because someone who's working in that area is not getting enough money. So what should we do?
Okay. So now let me ask you a question. How much do you feel in a low income neighborhood how much do you feel, let's say, a studio apartment should go for?
Well, again, it all depends
Low income.
because, yeah, in a low income, because if you go to a low income, say for example, I live in a low income neighborhood, and if I go to the supermarket, a gallon of milk is still running me $5. That's still
Interesting.
a lot of money. That's still a lot of money for a low income.
So
So,
it could be
so
$5 in a low income neighborhood and $5 in a upper, you know, a middle class
right
neighborhood.
in a upper class, right? So the food and everything is going up. The food and everything is going up. Everything is so expensive now. Everything
Hmm.
is so expensive now. Everything is you know, on a what do you call it?
On the
What is
rise.
the word? On the rise. So this is the thing now. When you say how much is a studio apartment, that landlord, everything is going up on that landlord, which could be the gas bill, which could be the taxes, which could be the home insurance. So where does the line draw? So when you say for a one bedroom in a low income, what should that be? You know what I mean? Um, for a private person, it has to be the maximum amount that allows for a studio apartment. So a studio apartment could be $1,800 a month.
Hmm.
Give and take $1,800 a month for a studio. And the reason why I say it now is because the low income houses in the low income, that's what's hurting the landlord, the owners, private owners, because again, what maintain the low income houses? Programs. Where those programs come from? People's taxes.
Hmm.
So I live in a low income. Guess what? A three-bedroom, I'm paying $1,800
Hmm.
for a three-bedroom, or maybe even a four-bedroom in a low income building that's run by the city. That's a
Hmm.
steal. So
Right,
guess
definitely.
what? Section 8 is going to pick that bill up. They have another program called FEP's going to pick that bill, going to, pick up the bill. And when they pick up the bill, again, what happens? It comes from taxpayers' money, which while a person who owns their property don't have that. You know what I mean?
Right.
They can, don't get me wrong now, they can get tenants who have vouchers and stuff. But a lot of times they don't want to deal with people who have vouchers because, again, they mess up the property. So they rather go with private people who go out to work. And the ones who go out to work is hard because they really not making that money because they on a minimum wage, which is $15. And that's the sad part. So
Well, I think that I see where the problem is coming in here, and I know a lot of people, they get a little comfortable with government housing. However, I think if they was paid a fair wage as opposed to a minimum wage, let's call it that. Let's call it a fair wage. If they was paid a fair wage, I think they would rather live in private housing as opposed to government housing because the owner will take much more care of their property. So in return, the tenant would care more about where they stay. But I think when we give, when we, when you give something to someone or some people, they tend to take it for granted and don't appreciate it because they didn't work hard for it. And so they care less about it. So in return, the landlord's property may get tore up, holes in the walls, or whatever the case might be. But if you're working a 40-hour work week and you're paying your full rent and you have an apartment that you really like, and you're not assisted by government and you doing this on your own, I think a person would take more pride in where they live and where they stay. So with that being said, if you have a minimum wage that was a fair wage and it would allow people to be able to pay their own rent in these private buildings, then the landlord would be able to get the money that he wants for the property because the minimum wage will allow the tenant to be able to pay for that. The question is, or the problem is, what you mentioned earlier, things go up. So when the oil goes up or when the cost
Yeah.
of building material goes up, and then the landlord is required to, must increase the rent, what happens to minimum wage? Do we increase the minimum wage every time the landlord's expenses go up? Or maybe since the law is, I think the law is 10% on a 2-year lease, right? Or maybe every 2 years on a 2-year lease, maybe that's what the where the minimum wage should go up, an additional 10% to compensate the difference, or else
Right.
we'll be back in the same hole.
Right. Right. Okay. So so now you have um two dilemma. One is one is New York City raising that fair wage,
Mm-hmm.
right? To about, I don't know, let's say 25 an hour. And then you have private business who who feel that 2025 is hard for them to pay out to our employee.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where do we go from there?
Okay, interesting. So maybe the owner of this business needs to recalculate his expenses and what he's doing. Maybe the owner of the business needs to pick up a little bit more responsibilities and labor in his own business to compensate, the what he's able to afford. If you
Okay.
can't afford to have two people working for you, then you
You
have
have one.
one and you do the other, you do the rest of the work
Right. You
yourself.
you put up the slack. Right.
Right?
Okay.
Or you add more responsibilities to the people who you have working there. They're getting paid a fair wage to work, not to be
Okay.
on their phone or sit around or,
And not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
and not,
Okay.
right. So, that's,
All right.
we have to monitor that. These are the things that must happen.
Okay. All right.
There-
I
my-
get it.
Let me say one more thing here. My professor once said, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Okay. All right. So back to the minimum wage with these rent. It's what is the real solution? What is the real solution? Like what I said, in my opinion,
Hmm.
once we have public housing there, it's going to always be an issue for private owners because the public housing is maintained by the city.
Right.
So that's where the problem lies.
Are you in
You know,
favor of government housing?
no, because again, um, it enables some people. Some people it works good for. Don't get, I don't want anybody to kind of, um, misunderstand what I'm saying.
Hmm.
It could be good for some people, but some people take advantage. You know what I mean? That means, okay, the city's paying all of this. I don't got to do anything.
Hmm.
I don't got to get up and work. I don't got to do anything. You know what I mean? And then you do have some people say, okay, yo, they get up and they go out and they got to go to work. But God bless what they're bringing in because they still have to pay some housing, though. You still have to pay your light and your gas.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. What people do you think would benefit from government housing? What
The
type
ones
of
that who's
people?
working,
I'm
the
saying,
ones that who, yeah, the ones who's work. For example, say I'm working and I am getting $15 an hour and I live. Matter of fact, first of all, in housing, you have to be making less than the normal to be living there in the first place.
and what's the normal?
I don't know. I would have to do the research, you know what I mean? But I know you have to have less than the minimum. So for example, the reason why I even said it because I know even with Medicaid, if you're trying to get Medicaid and if you have a income every month, your income is $2,000. If your income is $2,000 and you try to apply for Medicaid, you ain't even getting Medicaid.
Okay,
It
so then we'll
it,
put it
it
like
has
this
to
then.
be under 2,000.
If you work less than a 40-hour work week, if you're a part-time employee, then
You may be
government
qualified for it.
housing would be good for you.
Yeah, you'll probably be qualified for the housing, or they see that your income that you're making is less than minimum wage. You'll
Right.
be qualified for it.
Now, how does that happen? How do you get an income of less than minimum wage? Wouldn't
Depends
that
on who
technically be illegal?
it would be, but then again, if you apply for a job and you and this person you have your papers and you and this person make an agreement, this is what I'm paying out because this is what it is. You know, it may not really be illegal.
So we're talking maybe
So it'd be
something
up
that's
to
off the
me.
books or something.
It'd be up to me to say, oh, okay, you're going to pay me $10 an hour. I don't think this job is for me. I'm going to try to find that job that's going to pay me at least minimum wage.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So, um, it all depends when you're going into housing. It all depends on your situation, and it all depends on your housing, not your housing, your income.
Hmm.
That's how you get in. You know what I mean? Because that's why they say low income. Some people don't have no job, but they be able to get in because here we go. Section 8 will pick up the slotness. PEPS will pick up the slotness. The city program will pick up the slotness. Say, for example, and this is how I would definitely get it. I have 3 kids.
Right.
I don't have any income. They're not going to let me be on the street. They will put me into the projects and say, okay, you're going to apply. I'm going to apply for the Section 8 for you, or you could apply for the PEPS, and we will take care of that. So a lot of times is when you really have children, you get these programs,
Hmm.
and then we abuse it. We don't say, you know what, let's try and get better. Let's try to see what we can do out there. But you did say something earlier in the program when you said, okay, um, minimum wage should really be about your income that you're making, the average income. So if the city even knows that, okay, rent can really go for 2,200 a month, a 2 bedroom. No way minimum wage should be 15. We should kind of maximize the minimum so those working people can afford to pay their rent and buy food.
Right. Right.
So I definitely agree with you on that.
Okay.
So is that going to happen? I doubt it. I doubt it's going to happen because maybe I don't want to doubt because anything is possible.
Right. Right.
Anything is possible.
You
I
know,
don't really want to doubt it.
it's an interesting topic because personally, I would like to see people be able to afford and sustain a living on their own by working a 40-hour work week. You know what I mean? If you're
Yeah.
making whatever it is that you're making, you should be able to, if you're a single individual, you should be able to afford, at the bare minimum, if you're making minimum wage, at least a studio apartment at the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Not
I
a
agree.
room in somebody's house, because
I agree.
I don't classify that. You have shared cooking facilities, and that
Right.
creates a whole nother problem.
Right.
But
I agree.
you should be able to have or be able to afford a studio apartment. Now, there are people, now that you brought it up, who are eligible for government assisted housing. And I think we covered part timers, people who work less than 40 hours a week. Does that mean 36? Well, maybe it needs to be not based on number of hours. Maybe it needs to be based on the amount of the income. People who are in school looking to better themselves and unable to, because of children or whatever the case might be, unable to work and go to school, but are willing to go to school and to better themselves to get a better job. They should be, allotted government housing. And in return, I think the government should assist them once the school is completed by not just sending them out on job interviews, but on successful completion of their school, hire them.
Right.
Give them a job. Don't send them here and send them there for job interviews where they end up never getting hired. First of all, they don't have the money to go on these interviews. You know what I mean? They don't have
Right. Right.
the
Right.
proper clothes because they haven't been working. Hire them. Give them
Right.
a stipend. Give them a $500, $250 stipend to get their outfit ready for the first week of work or whatever the case might be, and hire them.
Right.
And send them out. Now you just turn someone into a fully productive citizen, capable of paying their own taxes and living on their own without government, you know, assisted living permanently.
Right.
And I think that I know people probably, enjoy, not paying rent and living living free, but if they sat down and think about it or thought about it, I think that they would probably prefer to be able to maintain their own apartment and be able to live in private housing and, decorate the apartment the way they like. Because some of these government housing, I'm sorry, but one of the reasons why I'm so against a lot of this government housing is because the conditions of it. I probably
Right.
wouldn't be so against it if every time we turn around, you see mounds of garbage, the grounds is unkept. I see on the news rats and rodents crawling through
Right.
buildings,
Right.
and this is what turns me off. I don't feel nobody should live like that. I don't care if it's
And
free or not.
I agree with you. And that's how the system is set up. You understand? So if you don't have a mentality to say, you know what, I want to strive for better,
Hmm.
you're going to fall for the housing because you're going to say, hey, I don't have to pay this amount of rent. I'm living free. And then it's sad because the kids them would have that mentality and grow like that
Yeah.
and don't want to have any ambition.
It's
They don't
not
want.
good. Your child could get bit by one of these rats. And have you seen the size of some of these rats they showing on TV?
I know, but guess what? If you just talking about this now, I've seen them when I was young in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I see them in the subway station.
Mm-hmm.
I seen them in the neighborhood where I lived. You understand?
Yeah.
So it's no it's no anything to do with the city. It ain't no help. I always call it the shit stem.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I call it because that's what we get.
You know,
They don't help. They don't help people. They don't care about us. We get the bottom of the bottom. And some of the supermarkets in there, if you don't look good at the food is not even good.
yeah, I notice, especially in the low income neighborhoods.
Right.
I mean, the
In the
meat
low
looks
income.
red in the store, and then when you get it home, it has this brown look to it. Like, whoa,
Exactly.
what's going on here?
Exactly. This is what they're feeding us. Right. Right. You know what I mean? So we have to look at ourselves and say, okay, how can we educate ourselves? How can we get better? How can we get out of this stuff? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the city need to change, get rid of those projects, and put it into decent homes where people can live to eliminate certain stuff, even the drug dealing,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff that goes on in the areas. You know what I mean? Because guess what? They're using our tax money. That's what they're using to make them live free. They're using our tax money, so they can use our tax money to make the place better.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? And then what I realized the other day now, not even the other day, because I heard this been up for a minute, that they have speed limits all over the place. So
Mm-hmm.
they collected money from everybody in any angle in the city. So they need to do better with low income families.
Right.
We matter.
Mm-hmm.
We matter. And the homeowners who do live, who do have homes in low income, the people that live there and they barely making it, as what you said, the minimum wage should match what the daily living is.
Yeah, just as a match.
Right, just to match it. You know what I mean? So at least you say, okay, I'm paying my rent, I'm buying food, okay, I got $30 left over to go to a movie.
Mm-hmm. But your expenses are paid. You shouldn't have
Right,
to be. I feel we're being forced into having to do two jobs or do overtime, and I
right,
think that should be an option. It shouldn't.
right,
You shouldn't have to work overtime
right. And this what's
just
been
to make
going
a
on.
living. You shouldn't have to
This
do
what
that.
Listen, this been going on from my mom days, your mom days, way, way, way back.
Hmm.
This been going on, and it keeps going. It's a cycle, keeps going.
And I
You know
think
what I
one of
mean?
the reasons is people are not addressing the issue. You know, it's not really being addressed where it needs to be addressed. They're beating around the bush with it. And so,
Right,
just like the
right,
fact that minimum wage is $15 an hour in New York, but nobody's addressing the fact that minimum wage at $15 an hour is not enough to sustain
right,
a decent, or not even a decent, a fair living standard. It just doesn't.
right.
It just doesn't cut it. So how come they're not addressing that issue? The minimum wage needs to be able, you need to be able to sustain a minimum cost of living. You need to be able to
Right,
do that.
because again, I live in a two-bedroom. I'm paying $2,200 a month. I have my light, I have my gas, I have to buy food. I'm
Mm-hmm.
near $3,000 a month. I
Mm-hmm.
get $2,400 for the month, but guess what? Uncle Sam is taking what he needs to take out.
Right.
So I'm walking away with probably $2,000.
Not even. More
You
like
know,
18.
right? And I'm not even, and that's not even making my rent. So
Mm-hmm.
my rent is $2,200.
And they supposedly, with the lotto, they're supposed to be taking the money from the lottery and using it to better the schools. That was a bunch of crock. I mean,
But
you might do something to one or two schools, but I see a lot of improvements these schools need. Come on, you have kids coming in and shooting and killing teachers and students. This has become a thing now. It's sad. You can't secure the door. You're
But
unable. That's your
this
first
is
priority.
this is the history of it. You know what I mean? And I really don't want to say it's just in poor neighborhoods, because you have high end neighborhoods that they shooting up schools too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really want to just say it's in the poor neighborhoods, but I really want to tell you though, more shooting is going on in the up class, middle class areas versus the low income areas with
Mm-hmm.
schools. If you think about it, you know what I mean? Because I
Mm-hmm.
really haven't heard any public school in Brooklyn been shooting up. You know what I mean?
Not like you've
Versus
been hearing. Yeah.
like you're here up in Connecticut.
Right.
We just had one in Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So our problem in the poor neighborhood is just that we are fed the crap. No one cares. You know what I mean? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like we struggling to survive. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I
And
brought that. I'm
the
sorry to cut
system
you off.
needs to
Yeah.
change, though.
Mm-hmm. I
The
brought
system
that.
needs to change.
I brought that point up about the schools because it shows that the money that they are getting is not being used or utilized the way it was intended to be utilized. And so something is going wrong right there. When we're tracing or following a buck, where is it going? The first order of business, if you're taking money from the New York State Lottery and you're telling me the lottery is now worth $1 billion, then you must have taken in a whole lot more than $1 billion in order for you to give someone $1 billion as a prize. And if this excess money is supposed to be going for the schools, the first order of business is to be able to lock and secure these children while they're in school. That's the first order of business. Second
Yeah,
order of business is to make sure the teachers are proficient
qualified.
and qualified in what they do. And the third order of business is to make sure that they have the proper equipment to go through whatever school it is that they're doing, whatever it is that they're doing. And security is number one. We shouldn't have these issues. It's insane to keep hearing some child walked into a school with a gun and shot and killed 4 people, 10 people, 20 people. It's insane. What was the last one? They walked in through the back door? Or, oh no,
No,
they shot the door down. What kind
shot.
of
Yeah,
door
shot.
was it?
It was a regular. It was a regular glass door. You know what I mean? One of those
A
school doors.
regular glass school door. With all the
Yeah.
shootings going around here, a regular glass school door.
Yeah, but who would think that that would happen at a Christian school? Number one,
Doesn't
and I
matter.
forgot where.
Any school, doesn't matter.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to tell you. I get it and I understand it, because that's what I said. Look what happened in Connecticut. So I
Hmm.
get it can happen anywhere, but who would have thought that this person was going to come and do it, and come to find out this is the person who went to the school.
Hmm. And
You
this
see what
is,
I'm saying? So it's not like a
well,
random criminal who came and said, you know what, I'm just going to shoot up this school.
hmm well, this is the thing. This is what I'm saying. In order to combat this type of thing, these killings, you have to stay step ahead of the game.
What
You
is
can't.
that?
Well, we already know how many times has someone walked into a school and killed students. How many times? So we know that this has become a thing at this point. So if you're a school of any sort, Christian or public or
All right, so time out. So in other words, what you're basically saying, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think this is
hmm
where it's going.
hmm
In other words, you're saying that all schools just need to have bulletproof glass. Everything bulletproof. All schools.
if that's what's required, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah,
Because
there should
because
be
we
some
don't
way that a
know.
person cannot walk into the school, and you can't tell me that's impossible to be done.
No, but that's just it. That's just it. The last school, the person just didn't walk in. The doors were locked.
And you
She
had the
shot
wrong
herself
kind of
in.
doors, but you had the wrong kind of doors.
So this is what I'm trying to say to you. Are you saying all schools need to just be bulletproof all around?
Yeah, yeah,
So that would be the
yeah,
only
yeah.
that
That's
would
what
be
you
the
would
only
need
way.
then. If this is the direction that things is going, then that's what you need. You need the doors need to be secure where somebody just can't take a gun and shoot the lock off and walk in and kill people. Yes, if that's the way you want to put it, yeah, yeah. You need bulletproof doors then.
Right, right, right. That's just the only way because again, you don't know what school. But I tell you this. I tell you this. I never heard a school in Harlem got shot up. I never heard of a school in Brownsville, East New York, in the poor neighborhoods. Never heard it got shot up. Or you know,
I see where you're
it,
going with that, and this is another issue now. This is an issue of how are they getting a hold of the guns and who is getting a hold of the guns. I think it was a
right,
conversation I had with you or someone else who mentioned that, they say they want to strengthen the gun laws, do an extensive background and criminal background check
right,
on the people that,
right.
trying to
Purchasing
purchase
these guns.
guns. But the people that's doing these shootings inside these schools,
Don't have
most
no
of the
record.
time, don't have no record. Right? You was the one that
Right.
meant,
They
yeah, don't
claim
have
they
a
don't have
record.
any record. Right.
So
But
yeah,
let's kind of rewind back.
okay,
Let's kind of rewind back when you said you know where I'm going with this.
okay,
Um, when I said in the poor neighborhoods, you don't hear the schools and getting shoot up, this and that, and da 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 da.
hmm
Because the American way, and remember, we all Americans now, but the American way, we got to go hunting.
hmm
So we're gonna go buy guns, and I'm gonna show my 2 year old how to shoot a gun. Now, who does that? More white people do it than black people.
mm
They live for hunting. So this is how come a lot of these guns is so disciplined. This is why they don't want to get rid of the guns. Okay, now you have these kids who grew around that and they know about guns and stuff. When they get older, they just go purchase their gun, or sometimes they take a gun out of their parents' house and take it to school. I don't know if you heard about
Yeah, I've
I don't
heard
know if you
that.
heard about what is it? A first grader or a kindergarten? I think it's a first grader. Took his mom's gun. This happened in Virginia. Took the mom's gun and shot the teacher.
Mm.
First grade. I don't know if you heard about it. That was
Was it
insane.
just a teacher or was a student involved too? I think I heard something where
No,
a
it
teacher
was
and a.
just the teacher.
No,
It
I
was
haven't
just
heard
the
about that
teacher.
one.
Yeah, it was just the teacher. That was insane. That was insane. So my thing is this: people who are going to purchase gun, you need to make sure you lock up your gun in a safe, secure place.
hmm
That's number one. Okay. Now the ones them who's purchasing the gun and they have a clean record of shooting up these schools and stuff like that, it comes back down to this. Oh, they got mental illness. Oh, um, I would have never imagined my daughter or my son would have done this thing. They were just going through some stuff. They
hmm
wrote this on social media.
hmm
It got to stop. It got to stop. You know what I mean? So I have a gun shop. You come in to purchase gun. I do all the proper stuff. I ran background check. You're clean. You never had a record.
hmm
Why shouldn't I sell you that gun? I didn't see no red flag.
Right. And it'd be
So
that gun that goes into a school and kills five
right,
people.
exactly. So I give you the gun now. I did everything right.
hmm
Your credentials look excellent.
hmm
You went out there to go shoot up the school. So something is wrong.
Yeah. Now
So
they're
how
going to
do
say, okay, speaking of location or race, they're going to say, okay, maybe you have that one on us, but don't take. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen in another direction in the black neighborhoods, because we have. I've heard so many times where these young kids are just shooting randomly, and killing. I feel so sorry for their neighbors and 5-year old
Because
kids and
because
3-year old
let
kids
me tell
getting
you what
shot
that's
in the
about.
head.
Let me tell you what that's about. I'm not picking that gun going up to a school to shoot up any kids. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going after that drug dealer because I'm in the gang or that gang member. That's
Mm-hmm.
what that is
Yeah.
in the black neighborhood. It comes down to be a drug dealer or a gang member. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're a gang member, you're gonna have drugs in it. Because everybody is a drug dealer. Okay, he owed me some money or he's trying to take my spot. Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna handle my business. Oh, he tried to disrespect me. I'm gonna handle him. And I don't care who's around.
Mm-hmm.
And those innocent bystanders get shot. That's how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole different segment.
Right.
What are we going to do to make our young black men and young black women better?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to make them, how are we going to take the guns out of their hand for them to start loving themselves and their community?
And see, this is what I would like to do if I had the ability to do it, because I think the ulterior motive behind people that may be on street corners selling drugs or whatever the case might be, I think their ulterior motive is to be able to make money and to take care of their children and their families or
Yeah, that's
whatever.
it. That's
And
it.
I think that more opportunities to do that because they realize and they understand that minimum wage is not going to cut it. Even if they go out and work a 40-hour work week, they still want to come back and they're going to be in a hole. And this is the government's
And this is right,
monster
right.
that they've
But
created. They've created this monster. You know what I mean?
okay,
I
okay,
also
let's take a
believe that bullets, okay, bullets, the cost of a bullet should be about $500 a piece. Then maybe people won't be wasting them so much. You know, I wanted to get
right,
that out there. Increase the
right.
price of the bullet.
Well, I agree. Whatever to make it harder for people to buy it. But you see, the rich people, that ain't gonna be nothing for them. They're gonna be able to buy that. That's gonna be a slap on their shoulder. No
Yeah,
big
but they
deal.
ain't gonna want to. They're not gonna want to.
But
Let them things out of their sight at that price.
right, but when you say a lot of these drug dealers, um, they sell drugs because you say the $15 hour a job, a $15 hour ain't cutting it. I tell you this: out of 100, 99.9 never had a job, so they don't even know the the um the real deal of even going out there to earn it. So if they did, I ain't gonna go sell drugs. They sell drugs because their mother can't buy them what they want.
Okay,
Or they
now
got
watch where you're
somebody
going.
pregnant.
Watch where
Wait
you're
a
going,
minute,
cause yeah, go ahead.
wait a minute. They got somebody pregnant who they need to go take care of this kid,
Hmm.
and they're not even doing it the right way because a lot of time when they make this money, what are they buying? Flashy clothes, cars. They're not even invested into homes.
Hmm.
They're not even investing into business. What are they doing? They buying all these swag and trying to be and all these hot cars. That's what they're doing with the money. So their
Hmm.
brain level is not even ready yet.
Hmm.
So I kind of disagree with the $15 with them. They don't even know what it means to work.
Well,
And if
here's
and
the
a
thing.
person and a
Listen.
person who is in that situation. So say for example for me,
Hmm.
okay, tag it's $15 an hour. I gotta make my ends meet. You know what I gotta do? I gotta go work extra hours or I gotta pick up overtime. That's
Hmm.
what a normal person would do. And guess what? We burning ourselves while we do that. But we don't got no choice because we gotta make our ends meet.
Well, see, this is what I wanted to say. So once again, this is the monster that the government has created. So and now it goes back to your education system. Look at the schools.
But
Look at the schools in the low income neighborhoods, and then look at the schools in the upper class or middle class neighborhoods. There's a big difference. You know,
absolutely, because
when I
I
was coming
experienced
up in
it.
school, I grew up in the south side of Jamaica. When I was coming up in school, we didn't have computers in our classrooms and that sort of thing. We didn't have that. You know what I mean? We had the regular notebooks. We didn't have all this fancy stuff.
But
unless
forget
it
about
was.
the yeah, forget about the fancy stuff. I'm talking about back in the 80s and the early 70s. They
This is
had
what I'm talking
nothing.
about. We didn't have that,
Right.
and so there's only but so much of a level of education you're going to obtain from a school that has nothing basically to offer. So what do you have? You have kids hanging out in the hallways, and then you have them growing up, and
Dropping out
you
of
have them
school.
dropping out of school, and then let's smoke some
Yep.
weed or let's do
Yep.
this, and you know,
Yep.
and
And
so
get caught up.
right, they get caught up in the system, and it's the
Right.
government who has created this monster. If you had entertained these children while they were young and put knowledge into their brains while they was young, show them what it is to be to open bank accounts and to manage their money. I had no class like that growing up.
No, me
Show them
neither.
what debit cards and credit cards and this sort of thing was about. Get them working and geared in the right direction.
I didn't, yeah, I didn't have that too, but sometimes too, we gotta look at our parents. Meaning you had some parents, like what I said, I grew up with my friends, and majority of their parents didn't work. They were on welfare.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care. You see what I'm saying? I grew up in a different mentality. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm no different than my friend how we grew up because again, I've been to school every day. I should have been a scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, I'm average. They taught me nothing in school, but what I learned at home is that my mom was a hard worker. She worked, she worked, she worked. And I'm telling you, God bless the money she even brought home back
Mm-hmm.
then in the 70s. I'm talking about like $250 a week. She never complained. And she never said this is where she was going to stay. She kept working and doing her little side hustling, buying stuff and selling stuff. I've seen that growing up. And I guess that's what made me who I am. So now I have my kids. I give them the opportunity. I give them the opportunity to I got a call coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I give them the opportunity to be better than hold on one second.
Okay.
That was my son talking about my kids. That was my son calling in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is this: we got to show our kids a different thing. We can't be cussing our kids and be like, "Oh, you know, good for nothing. You ain't gonna be anything. Oh, you might ever, stuff like that." I see my friends and parents talk to them like that.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So sometimes we have to be accountable. And like what I said, our race is the worst race. We don't get together. If I even try to scold your kids, you're gonna look at me and tell me, "Don't talk to my kid like that, and don't do this to my kid and this and that." We don't have no unity. You know what I mean? And we want to blame the system.
Mm.
We got to get up, support each other. I love Malcolm X. Malcolm X said one time that we have to know how to deal with ourselves before we could deal with anybody.
Mm.
We don't know how to do that because we tearing each other down. The parents tearing their kids them down. I see my friends' parents tear them down, cuss them and call them all kind of name in the book. At my household, it was all about school. It was all about books. It was all about getting your education. And at the same time, my mom, she's from Jamaica, but she didn't understand. Even though I'm going to school, they're not teaching me anything. But she didn't know. I learned from her to see what she did and what she accomplished. That's who I learned from.
So you are Jamaican,
Yeah.
and what was the school system like out there?
Oh, totally different. Totally, totally different. Let me tell you, the kids in Jamaica are just so. Even I'm trying to tell you, even the public schools, and you don't have to be private. The public school are more disciplined. The kids are more smarter. It's a structure. It's just different,
You think the
you know.
school
And
system in Jamaica is better than the school
way
system?
better, way better. Way it ain't no question, ain't no doubt about it. It's way, way, way better. You know, and like what I told you, I even had a niece who came here when she was 14, and she's supposed to be. They was gonna place her to ninth grade. When she took the test, they literally had to put her in 11th grade. She passed everything.
Hmm.
She was beyond. She was beyond. She was beyond. She was beyond. So I'm sorry I didn't get my education in Jamaica and then come up to do my what do you call it? To do my college. Because for example, I have one brother, he have his PhD, he got his master's, you name it, he got everything. But he started off in Jamaica because he didn't leave Jamaica until he was one of the oldest ones because 11 of us. And he came up here when he was about maybe 17, and at that time he was applying for colleges. He
Hmm.
did his the high school diploma, whatever he needed to get in there. He got that as a breeze. He's an architect. He used to work for the city.
Hmm.
He knows all the violations on buildings and you name it. He's an engineer. Very, 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 very smart.
Hmm.
And he got most of his education from Jamaica, the early base. You just want to get the early base, and then that just take you further. So I got the bad stick of it. And then my mom always say, she regret coming here. She wish we all was back in Jamaica. But I told her no, never regret it because you still came and you did what you did, even though the system kind of failed us. You know what I mean? And it didn't really fail us. We did what we had to do, and then as we got older, we just did what we had to do.
Right.
So we
Right.
realized what she was about. You know what I mean? So again, a lot got to do with the household. So if I was a parent who said, you know what, I could just live inside the housing and stuff, you know, why not? I don't got to pay any rent. I'm drinking, smoking, doing drugs because back in the 80s now, let's not forget. Here comes the drug. Here comes the crack.
Hmm.
So at that time, that was just crazy. And a lot of my friends' parents got hooked on it.
Yeah.
So they got caught up. You know what I mean? So you have to be strong, level head, and get all that poison out of your system and just have a different mentality. And that's like with the Jewish. What the Jewish them do, the Jewish them stick together.
Yeah.
The Italians them stick together. The Italians stick together. Don't forget the Italians is a mafia, right? They be coming in and selling all kinds of stuff. But they families stick together. Spanish people stick together. We the only one who have an issue, and then we turn out to be like, and we want to kill each other.
Yeah. I went
But
through Harlem recently, and it reminded me of back in the '70s and the '80s when the drugs was prevalent and people was leaning over and bending over on corners, and I'm like, wow, this is coming
right,
back.
it's coming back. Right,
Because we
remember
kind of got
it.
away with it, got away from it for a little while, for a good while. You know
Yeah,
what I
because
mean?
I remember the area in Brownsville area. It was like a ghost town because every building was abandoned building and was all crackheads living there.
Mm.
That's how the neighborhood looked.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So I remember that, and a kid who's in that neighborhood, growing up in that neighborhood, what do you expect?
Hmm.
Especially if you don't have no role models trying to keep everything. You're gonna get caught up. You're gonna start selling drugs.
Hmm.
This way I can make some fast money. Yeah, go buy a $200 pair of sneakers, buying the Guess, buying the Tommy Hill figures, you know,
Hmm.
the Louis, and not really thinking. So we get caught up. You know what I mean? And it's sad. And that's why Black people definitely have to know their Black history. And
Hmm.
a lot of them don't know their Black history and just take everything for granted, because it's out there for everybody. It's just, it's just, who is gonna, have that conscious mind to say, I gotta do what's right. I gotta, be different. I can't fall for this. I can't be satisfied with this. I want more.
Hmm.
I need to make a difference with my circle that I'm in, and that's why I said, a lot of these rappers, they make this money, and I really don't know what they really do. So I don't really want to, pinpoint anybody because I don't know what they're doing. But um, maybe if they go back where they come from, even in their neighborhood, you build a library right there in their neighborhood. You build a recreational center right in their neighborhood. Things that kids can do to get guns out of their hands,
Right. I would love to see that. You know,
to show them
imagine
that they to
a
show them that,
library,
yeah,
Jay Z's
yeah,
public library, or whatever the case might
right,
be. This would be,
right.
I
Put the
would love to see
rapper's
that.
name on it because the kids them love the rappers. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Exactly.
Put their rapping name on it. And
Hmm.
show them that, yeah, if I can get out of here, you can do the same thing too. And
Right.
then, kids them love rapping. You then have a little studio for them to come in and rap and, teach
Exactly.
them the ins and the ahs and the out how to rap. You know what I mean? Give them a little opportunity for them to say, okay, well, you know what? I do like to rap, and they got this in the recreational center. Oh, I love art, and they have this in the recreational center. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
have scholarships so they'll be able to go to college.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Because if we don't help our,
Selves.
who is going to help us?
That's right. And on that note, Miss D out of New York, we're going to end this session. And I want to thank you for really bringing up those great points. My word is that, yeah, we really need to take hold of the guns and be more responsible with it, no matter what neighborhood you're in, white,
Right,
black, Spanish, it doesn't matter, because we all have some responsibility in the killings that's going on with our children. And these are our next governors and mayors and presidents of the world. And the government, for you, we see what you're doing. We see what you're doing. And that minimum wage need to be regrouped and rethought of.
yes,
Even in college, we cannot get financial aid, proper financial aid in college, because
right.
the basis of your financial status
It's your basic,
is
exactly,
so old. It goes back 20 years and it doesn't
exactly.
match up with today's standards. So the average person, although they might be making minimum wage, based on your standards, which is relevant to 10, 15 years ago, doesn't fit. And the new minimum
Exactly.
wage and the prices of things is much higher, so you need to regroup and check that. Miss D, Miss Ramsey out of New York, we'd like to thank you for coming down and talking on
Yes.
what part of the game is that. And remember, we're going to call you back in soon because we want to talk about mental illness, which is one of your specialties, I heard. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Take care and talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye bye.